Hello, everyone. Pazardasa Regan with Catholic Climate Covenant. Welcome to the growing impacts of data centers on our neighbors and God's creation. Um, I am going to give us about a minute to get everybody in that is in the wait. So, yes. So, let me get started by putting our slides up. Hold on. Okay. Hopefully, you can see the slideshow, and I will be getting started right now. So again, thank you for joining us. This is a webinar looking at the growing impacts of data centers on our neighbors and God's creation. And before we get started, we always do a little bit of housekeeping, and this is the information that you will need to know. We are recording this session, and I will be including the recording and the slides from the panelists in the follow-up email, which should be going out tomorrow or the next day. Um, Please submit all of your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat. The chat is for you to respectfully connect with each other, but the Q&A box is where you should put your questions for the panelists. And the chat, we ask that you be respectful and civil in your interactions. If I start seeing an issue, I may need to give you a warning. Hopefully, that will not need to happen. And as always, we begin our webinars with a prayer. Uh, and today, as we get started with this prayer, I want to take about a few seconds for everybody to have a moment of silence to pray regarding the issues of violence and war in the Middle East. Um, so let us quiet ourselves, center ourselves, and remember that we are always in the presence of God. Today's prayer is a Lenten prayer that was adapted for the U.S. Bishop's statement, the Lenten call for eco-conversion that they just released last month. O God, during this season of Lent, draw us into the desert, a place of fasting and prayer, removed from the distractions of the world. Help us listen to the voice of creation. Turn our hearts to you in our innermost space. Let us listen more carefully to creation, to others, and to you. Help us listen to the voice of creation. As we are touched in this listening by your incarnational presence, remind us of your love and mercy, your initiative and activity. Help us listen to the voice of creation. Show us your attentiveness to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, to the little ones wounded by a throwaway culture, and to those suffering due to natural disasters. Help us listen to the voice of creation. Listening to the voice of creation, help us to join in holy witness to protect those most vulnerable and to protect our common home. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I need to give a little bit of background before introduce our panelists, and that is that remind everybody that in January of 2025, the Vatican released Antiqua et Nova, a note on the relationship between artificial intelligence and human intelligence. In this document, they focused on the ethical challenges raised by artificial intelligence and encouraged us to welcome technological advancements while prioritizing harm mitigation and the promotion of the common good. Those things have a lot in common here with our webinar today. I invite you to watch the webinar. I gave you a link here. It'll be in the follow-up email. Today, we are here with three very knowledgeable and experienced panelists who will focus on the environmental and socioeconomic impacts of growing number of data centers that power the systems that in 2026 are making the technological part of our lives possible. It's not lost on me that this webinar would not be possible without data centers, so it is part of our reality. But how should we as people of faith discern the pros and cons of this growing technology that is making ever increasing demands for energy and water, land, and how we should respond, as the Vatican stated in DC.MD.NoVA, the need to prioritize harm mitigation and to promote the common good? Thankfully, the expertise of our panelists will help us discern and inform our response. Joining us today are, and I should let you know, I'm going to very briefly introduce the panelists. The longer bios I will share in the chat. So joining us today are Amanda Garcia, Senior Attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center, Ann Bennett, Chair of Sierra Club's Virginia Chapter's Data Center Campaign, and Robin Lewis, Director of Climate Equity at Interfaith Power and Light for the District, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. Getting us started will be Amanda. And Amanda, if you're going to be focusing on the issues that you have great expertise on, which is a variety of environmental justice issues in the South. But you've been the co-lead on the Southern Environmental Law Center's team that supported community opposition to Elon Musk's AIX, XAI, I guess is the name, in Southwest Memphis, and also it's expanding into Mississippi. So, Amanda, I will let you now have the floor here. Are you good, Amanda? Yeah,
I think so. Sorry, can everyone see my slides now?
not yet.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Paz, for that kind introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amanda Garcia. I'm a senior attorney in the Tennessee office of the Southern Environmental Law Center, and I lead SELC's regional data center work. For folks who may not be familiar with the Southern Environmental Law Center, I just wanted to share briefly, we're a national environmental law and policy organization rooted in the South. One aspect of our mission is to provide a healthy environment for all. Our theory of change is place-based, and that's because we believe the best solutions come from people living in communities directly affected by environmental challenges and change. For that reason, we have attorney boots on the ground in every state where we work: Virginia, North and South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee. We also have an office in DC where we engage on federal environmental policy that has an impact on our communities in the South. We are seeing a dramatic surge of data center development that is happening across the South. Why are so many data centers being located in our region? To put it bluntly, the South has space, cheap energy, tax breaks, and lax regulations. But the stakes for communities' shared resources, like energy, air, and water, not to mention a livable climate, can be extremely high. To give one example, our utilities are currently proposing 45,000 megawatts of new methane gas-fired power plants across the region. That's enough power to provide power for about 17 million homes. Shared resources are being squandered without much, if any, thought. I've seen this up close and personal with XAI's operations in the Memphis area. And I'm going to share a little bit of that story to ground us and root us in place, because that is the way that we think about the data center issue at SELC. For about the past 2 years, I've spent a lot of time working alongside community advocates to address air pollution and other impacts of Elon Musk's XAI artificial intelligence data centers in Memphis, Tennessee, and now South Haven, Mississippi. XAI's operations affect predominantly Black and lower wealth neighborhoods in South Memphis that have been overburdened by pollution for decades. Today, I'm going to briefly share the story of that work, as well as some information and resources on environmental justice and energy affordability with data centers more generally. In June of 2024, the Memphis mayor, the local utility CEO, and the Memphis Chamber of Commerce first announced the XAI data center as a done deal with no details. The community advocates that I work with regularly immediately started asking questions. How much water and power would XAI need? Where would those resources come from? Who would pay for them? To our surprise, many elected and appointed officials had the same questions because they too had been in the dark about this deal. A few months later, we discovered that XAI had installed 18 methane gas turbines on wheels to power the data center while it waited to connect to the grid. This was extremely concerning because Memphis is already violating minimum federal smog standards, and the turbines did not have a permit or any pollution controls installed. And this photo is a close-up of some of the turbines operating on site. You can see the heat coming off of the top of the turbines. We tried to get the local air agency to require XAI to get a permit, and they refused. Eventually, we sent a plane up and discovered that the 18 turbines had grown to 35 unpermitted, uncontrolled turbines. We then sent a notice of intent to sue XAI under the Federal Clean Air Act for installing and operating turbines without a permit on behalf of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or NAACP. After we sent the notice, XAI removed the unpermitted turbines and got a permit for 15 turbines to operate permanently. Hundreds of people showed up at the permit hearing to oppose the permit. Meanwhile, XAI continued to acquire property in South Memphis and announced its intention to copy and paste what it had done at the first data center at the second one. So on this map, you can see the first data center up in the corner and the second data center down toward the state line. And this shows the demographics of the affected community. Again, predominantly Black and lower wealth communities in between these two data centers. Through a public records request, we learned that XAI was proposing to install dozens of methane gas turbines at the second site. After we made that proposal public, the Memphis Chamber spoke up and said there wouldn't be any more turbines in Memphis. Soon after that, the mayor of South Haven, Mississippi, just across the border, announced a deal with XAI. It turns out XAI just wheeled its turbines across the border to set them up. Unlike air permitting authorities, air pollution doesn't know borders. Memphis and South Haven literally share the air. Together with Earth Justice, we have now sent another notice of intent to sue XAI, again on behalf of the NAACP, for installing and operating turbines without a permit. XAI has also proposed and sought a permit to construct even more turbines in South Haven, enough to power a mid-sized city. But those turbines aren't going to be powering a city, they'll be powering just the data center. We had an analysis done of the air pollution impacts just from those additional turbines, and Harvard-trained public health experts found that the air pollution would likely cause $30 to $44 million in health damages every year, including missed days of school and work, emergency room visits, and even deaths. Even though the gas plant is in South Haven, those impacts will be felt most acutely in the predominantly Black and lower wealth communities in South Memphis. Again, hundreds of local residents showed up to oppose the permit for this facility. The Mississippi Air Pollution or Air Agency is poised to consider the approval of this permit this upcoming Tuesday. We just found out this morning. And as the case moves forward, we will continue to evaluate all of our options. I tell you this story because XAI is an early and stark example of the unreasonable demands that AI data centers are putting on local communities, especially on communities that are already overburdened and with industrial pollution and extraction of shared resources like water and energy. Just yesterday, the Trump administration announced a so-called ratepayer protection pledge in which it agreed that big tech should get to impose its will on communities by building gas power plants on site with data centers, just like we've seen at XAI. The deal for communities is about to get a lot worse as the administration and big tech push in this direction. And this is especially true in Black, brown, and lower wealth communities where systemic racism results in greater vulnerability to unfair siting decisions and higher baseline pollution levels. Data center advocacy, regardless of the demographics of the local community, owes a huge debt to civil rights and environmental justice advocates who have been struggling for decades against the siting of undesirable land uses in predominantly Black and brown communities across the country. In the early 1990s, environmental justice advocates developed the 17 Principles of Environmental Justice and the Jemez Principles of Democratic Organizing. These two sets of principles provide the foundation for the NAACP's recently developed Frontline Framework Community Data Center Guiding Principles, which were actually developed in Memphis in the midst of the XAI fight, with input from NAACP advocates from around the country who are fighting data centers in their communities. You can find the principles on NAACP's Stop Dirty Data Centers webpage. The good news is that communities are fighting back, including against XAI. By engaging locally on data centers, communities across the South are laying the groundwork for renegotiating the terms of big tech's social license and are rebuilding democracy from the ground up. Community members are showing up, demanding more from their local zoning boards, from their city councils, boards of supervisors, and permitting agencies. Every time we as community members show up, we build our small d democratic muscles, and we make it clear that the terms of these data center deals are not working for the people who live near them. We need to keep showing up until we get heard and get a seat at the table to negotiate the terms of our shared future. And I just want to touch on a few of the key environmental justice concerns that we are hearing from communities across the South. First, transparency and information to make informed decisions. As folks on this call may be aware, a lot of these deals are being negotiated behind closed doors under the protection of non-disclosure agreements. And that makes it very hard for communities to even become aware of the full scale of the impacts that they may be asked to bear by their local decision makers. Communities also need a seat at the table to be able to talk with local leaders and the data center companies about their concerns and about how shared resources like air, water, and energy are going to be protected. Communities need to know about energy needs and where the power will come from, whether there will be an on-site power plant or a power plant nearby. Um, Air pollution is a big concern, as the XAI case demonstrates. Water use and consumption. We still don't know where XAI will be getting its water for its second data center. And infrastructure needs and bill impacts. So even apart from the amount of electricity and water that will be used, how will that use affect the infrastructure that distributes energy, that distributes water, that distributes gas, and what are our local leaders doing to ensure that tech companies genuinely pay their own way? In addition to these concerns, energy affordability is also a huge concern for communities. And one thing that we are very concerned about, especially in light of the announcement yesterday, the so-called Ratepayer Protection Pledge, is that we not be fooled by empty promises that are not enforceable and that don't actually hold big tech accountable for paying their own way. And once again, as I mentioned at the outset, we are concerned about potential overbuilding of gas infrastructure, including pipelines and power plants, to supply data centers, because we don't know whether all of these data centers will actually be built and need the power that is being projected by our utilities, which have an incentive to over build even without data center demand. So adding data centers on top of that is a concern. And finally, to wrap up, I just want to share a few resources that communities may find helpful. First, SELC has a very short fact sheet that kind of lays out what these concerns are, similar to the ones I just identified. We also have a more detailed guide to land use decision making. Land use is a very important place where communities can weigh in on data center development. If you have a proposal for a rezoning or a special use permit in your community to accommodate a data center. And I've also put the link in here for the NAACP's Stop Dirty Data Centers webpage, which has a link to those frontline framework principles I mentioned. And with that, I will turn it back over to Paz. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Amazing work that you all are doing down in the Memphis and Mississippi area. Uh, I will share the slides that you have your links, but I will also put those resources in the follow-up email. I think a lot of the questions that are coming in will be answered with our next two speakers as well. So I will not now, but at the very end. Our next speaker is Ann Bennett, and let me put Ann on there. Ann is lives in Virginia, and Virginia is the world's largest data center market. I mean, some people call it the data center capital of the world. It has, I believe, over 600 facilities concentrated heavily in the Northern Virginia data center alley, as they call it, and she'll be talking, I'm sure, about that. But a statistic that blew my mind is that it handles about 70% of global internet traffic. So Anne is chair of Sierra Club's Virginia chapter's data center campaign and land use chair of the local Sierra Club Great Falls Group. And she's got firsthand experience with the impacts of data centers and how local communities are responding. Anne, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here and really learned a lot about the last presentation. So really appreciate that. So I've been doing this for about 6 years. I sort of stumbled on it because of my background in land use, and that's how we got a real sense of how big this is going to be. So what we just heard from Amanda, um, think of things on steroids in Virginia, okay? And we were, of course, part of the South in her map. Um, but if there's one message I bring to you is that we need your voices out in the community to bring awareness. Public officials are just learning about this and to bring change. So Virginia is unique in its size and scope. There's no other state like it. I think Texas may begin to rival Virginia over time and maybe Ohio. But uh, this here are two pictures from our colleagues at the Piedmont Environmental Council. This is sort of what the Virginia countryside and including the metro area around DC are beginning to look like. It's not pretty. You see diesel generators on the right, and all sorts of acreage is being gobbled up by this industrial development. The buildings are going higher, they're going out and up. And so this is a newish building in Loudoun County, the epicenter. And really, there are, a huge spectrum of organizations that are backing this industry. And so the more familiar you can get with the utilities of, water, energy, the grid operator, construction. This is basically a construction program. Landowners, all the companies involved, labor unions. The more familiar you can be with all aspects of the industry will help you become more familiar and be able to talk to your legislators as well. So this is what I call the underbelly of the AI industry, and really it is to a large extent. It's in Memphis, but it's really in Virginia. These buildings are popping up everywhere, all over the state. On the right, you can see that this is an Amazon. There's 4 buildings under construction right next to ball fields. We're seeing that more and more. You should be aware of that. This happens to be cited under what's called by right conditions, so that there's no public hearing on this, and this is next to both public amenities and townhomes. So we're seeing that more and more. The same factors that Amanda talked about in terms of why Virginia are the same, except that we are also the sort of one of the 2 hubs for fiber, because the internet was based in Northern Virginia. So that's why a lot of the industry has expanded here as well. Here, this is a map that shows you all of the counties that have data center activity. So it's not just one place. It's not just a couple of counties. It's over 40 jurisdictions. It makes it very, very difficult to work throughout the state. Just to give you a sense that the industry this is the way that we at Sierra Cup sort of monitor the growth of the industry. And I would say that I wish I could say it has leveled off in terms of us being able to keep up with the natural resource demands, but it hasn't. It's continuing to expand. This is known data. This is not complete data, and in particular, the energy data is incredibly incomplete here in terms of it's just not disclosed to the public generally. So we're about at 670 gigawatts of projects we can keep that we know about. Just to give you a sense of what the campuses are beginning to look like, on the bottom left, that's in Stafford County, and 19 data centers, 8 million square feet almost, and 7 substations. So there are many that look like this in terms of in the concept drawings anyway. And so this is sort of what we're beginning to see throughout the state. And we are just not prepared. Our General Assembly is looking to do some data center regulation this term, but it's we are behind on regulation, on energy planning, and obviously cost has become a much bigger issue in the last year. What are the other impacts that we don't really talk about as much? Well, on the left, you can see what the newer substations look like. And I have been able to track so far 147 new substations in the state. There are more than that, but that's what we know of right now in terms of being built to service data center growth. And on the right, you can just see how a substation and transmission in Loudoun County is abutting recreational resources. Tree loss on the left. This happened here near where I live in Vienna, Virginia. This is clear cutting for transmission. So real impacts right now. Even in the most urban areas, this is a transportation route, a non-motorized transportation route, and obviously a lot of the shade is being lost. This is the scale of transmission we're seeing in Loudoun County on the right. On the left, we were actually the #1 importer of energy to meet the data center demand. We're now currently #2. Dominion is our large utility, has contracts for 70 gigawatts of power. If you think about, there's a picture of a power plant on the right that's a little bit under a gigawatt, but you're really talking about a power plant for each gigawatt of power. So there's a lot of new power plants that will be necessary to meet the demand. And on the bottom left, you see like that's actually the old demand curve, but everything is increasing. We're continuing to see a hockey stick kind of look to the demand curves for power. Just some comparisons, and this is important because who pays for power is an issue that most states are dealing with. But if we're going to need, let's just say 60 gigawatts, we know we're going to need more than that if the industry holds. You're talking about the equivalent of 68 coal plants, multiple small nuclear reactors, like hundreds of them. Or new natural gas plants, which we're already seeing, and certainly groups like Sierra Club are not supporting increased fossil fuel usage. Amanda talked about it. This is natural gas turbines. On the right is a currently burning data center in Sterling, Virginia. They have 8 turbines. It's as loud as you can imagine being right next to it. It is next to single family homes that have been there for a long time. I would say often these are sited near low income, but not in Virginia necessarily. They are sited all over the place, and they can be next to $2 million homes as well. There's a new study that PEC just announced about the impacts of natural gas turbines, and you might be interested in taking a look at that. Just a map of how many, these are what I call mega projects, needing over a gigawatt of power. Again, think about each power plant for a gigawatt approximately, and this equals already 37 gigawatts of power. So how are these major campuses going to be, their demand for energy going to met, and particularly clean energy, because certainly that's what Virginia Clean Economy Act calls for, and what we need as well. So just the scope is almost hard to explain. Prices continue to go up. This is an area where you can really advocate. We're seeing auction prices for power impacted. They're going through the roof. The state is approving increases in our utilities and may in your states as well. And then, of course, the federal action to limit clean power it will have a cost impact as well. So those are three areas you can be talking to your regulators or your electeds about. We are really concerned about diesel generation. This is both backup and increasingly seems to be non-backup power over time. We have one corridor that is in place in Northern Virginia. We'll see another in the Rappahannock area where we have thousands of diesel generators already permitted. As we know, they are highly polluting, highly dirty, and they are really near neighborhoods all over Virginia and increasing. So here's a picture of backup power at that Vantage gas plant when there was a problem during a recent storm, and soot comes out of them. And we had it also last summer when we had basically the grid had run out of power late last June because of high temperatures. So huge numbers of generators have already been permitted. We're expecting far more unless something changes at the state level. Thousands of these in particularly highly populated areas. Have been some bills to address this issue. And I don't think we're going to get anything that's comprehensive this year in the General Assembly, but that is something for you to look at because almost every data center has diesel fuel backup power. Obviously, carbon is a huge issue. This sector of the as an industry is emitting more and more over time, bigger percentage of emissions, and that is something you will want to raise as well. And we have too, and you may need to be in touch with public utility commissions over this. And then, I talked a little bit about the impacts. You can see them here. This is all over single family home on the right next to large data centers, increasingly a problem. This is single family with Amazon in Albany, Virginia in the background. And so you have noise, you have generally inadequate buffers, you have diesel fuel transportation, you name it. Lots of issues. You can pick and choose the issue that most resonates with you or most impacts you. There are many points of entry. Fencing is always inadequate. Here's water. This is an emerging issue, I would say. This is what some of the infrastructure looks like on the left. Increasing amounts of water are going to data centers as they move from air cooling to water cooling. And also the latest example here in Virginia is the new Google plant that had a court required transparency, and they will be using 2 to 8 million gallons per day to cool their newest plant. So gives you an idea of the scope of things. This is an area I would watch closely. And then just to I know I went through a lot of material, but just to end quickly, we have published, last summer, we published a report that outlines the data that we needed to acquire in order to understand how big this was going to be. And of course, it is big, and I encourage you to look at that. We are, as I said, updating those numbers now, but hope that is helpful.
Thank you, Anne. A lot of information to digest, but as I said, the slides will be sent to everyone. I am going to now switch to Robin. And Robin, let me spotlight you. And while I'm doing that, maybe Robin can start sharing her screen while I introduce you. So Robin Lewis, our final panelist, brings vast experience organizing the faith community on climate justice and environmental justice issues. She's going to speak on something that is very dear to my heart, which is how do we organize the faith community on these issues? And specifically, what I really excited about is Interfaith Power and Light in the DMV has a new project called Real Wisdom Campaign. And I think it is an example for others to really look at and see how that organizes the faith community. And go ahead, Robin. Your slides are showing. Thank you.
Great. Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. Um, as was mentioned, I'm with Interfaith Power and Light, and we also have a program within Interfaith Power and Light, Beloved DMV Environmental Justice Collective, which is specifically focused on environmental justice and advocating in the Black church. So I have that responsibility associated with my responsibility as Director of Climate Equity in Interfaith Power and Light. So, Interfaith Power and Light, for those of you who don't know, is an organization. We've been around in the DC area, and for those of you around the country, you know there are other IPLs across the country that respond to climate change from a faith perspective. We are responding in Maryland, DC, Northern Virginia, learning about going green, advocating for turning away from burning and electrification, and helping congregations become more sustainable, and also definitely getting engaged more in the advocacy aspect of environmental justice and climate equity. And as I mentioned, Beloved DMV Environmental Justice Collective is a collective of Black faith leaders in the region working to advocate for environmental justice policies, legislation, and various implementation aspects of environmental justice. So, as mentioned, I've been working in environmental justice for a very long time. So I did want to mention that environmental justice is not just about air, water, it's about everything, the built environment as well as the natural environment. And as was mentioned earlier about the 17 principles of environmental justice, please look them up. And the HEMES principles, all of those were built around the movement, which actually began in Memphis with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I'm not going to go into the history of environmental justice, that's a whole nother story, but please look it up, understand it's about community, it's about allowing the community to have a voice, and also not just have a voice, but have the ability to direct and self-direct what goes on in their community. So air pollution, industrial sites, all of these things I've listed here, all are environmental justice issues. And as you see, I put data centers next to everything. To me, this is one of the most, or the comprehensive environmental justice issues in the next 5 to 10 years. And it's happening so fast because we're talking about data centers, AI, and it's just moving very rapidly. So this is something that faith communities can really help and get involved in. And not just by themselves, because we are a part of the community. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but let me just jump into some of the things that Interfaith Power and Light DMV is doing. Before I do that, why should we do this as faith leaders? Environmental justice deals with people and community and making sure that communities that are overburdened and underserved are the first at the table, not just at the table, but helping to direct the decisions that are impacting their communities, because for so many years they've been left out. So that's one of the things that I want to emphasize here. This is about justice. This is about us helping the least of these and making sure that the people who are who normally don't get a voice get the voice that is needed, because their communities are being impacted. And as was mentioned, it's not just in Black, brown, communities of color, and low-income communities, but so often those communities already have pollutants and are already sacrifice zones. And when these data centers come along, that's just added, more fuel to the fire. So that is why it's an environmental justice issue. And as I have at the very bottom, it's about people over profits. That's what this is about. People, creation, us, and everything that God has created comes first, comes before all of this corporate greed and profit. So this is what this is about. This fight is a fight for creation. So, as mentioned, and I'm probably reiterating what the other speakers said, because I was listening to them and said, oh God, I said that in my presentation too. So, it's really about energy demands, energy burden. As I live in Maryland. Our rates are just unbelievably, Maryland and Virginia and DC and the DMV, our rates are crazy, crazy high. Everybody's complaining about us suffering because of these rising rates due to infrastructure, projected infrastructure, not infrastructure that exists. These are projected due to these data centers that are coming to our community and tempting our legislators with money in terms of property taxes, in terms of income taxes, not jobs, mind you, but really other things. And a lot of our communities and counties and states are strapped. I get it, but this is not the way. But that's what they're getting tempted with. Water use and discharge. I mean, we all in the DMV use the Potomac River. That's where our water comes from, and that's where our discharge goes. So we are very, very concerned about water, and not just discharge into the tributaries, but discharge into the ground and other places, as well as air pollution as these things evaporate using, as mentioned, using a lot of the cooling system. The water evaporates, and what happens, different things are discharged into the atmosphere, like PFAS and other things are being discharged. We're concerned about that as well. There's a whole plethora of things that we're concerned with regard to the environment, as well as noise. Zoning and siting. A lot of zoning and siting now are in overburdened and underserved communities. And I'll talk a little bit about the areas in Maryland as they branch out from Virginia. And we have a coalition, and we're working with Virginia as well, because we need to learn from each other. I'm also working with folks in Memphis. So we need to learn from each other so that we don't get caught up in the same thing. But this is what we're here for. We're here to learn from each other so that we can take what other people have done in other jurisdictions and do better in other jurisdictions before they get here, right? So these are some of the reasons. Why do communities find it difficult? Because the regulation associated with data centers is on several levels. A lot of regulations are done at the county level, at the very low level, like zoning, permitting, building codes. Then you have other things done at the state level. You have the infrastructure, energy infrastructure, utility, air permits and things like that. Those are done at the state level. Then you also have the federal government. FERC is involved, and there's other federal agencies involved. So because you have this 3 different levels and some associated with data centers, it's a very complex issue for communities to combat. So we're trying to do it at every level, but this is a big challenge for communities. This is a David versus Goliath. I mean, faith leaders need to get involved. We really do need to step up because we hold this place in the society in which we can share why this is a thing that is not moral. It is a thing that is something that we, holding the faith voices, can say, hey, you know what? This is not helping creation. Creation, it's not ours to ruin, it's ours to steward. And we can bring those conversations to not just the community, but to legislators. And they need to hear it. And a lot of times they respect it. So that's why we need to get involved. I just listed a few places around the country, but it's happening everywhere. If you go and look, there's various maps of where data centers are prevalent, and they're everywhere. And there's fights all over the place. Faith leaders are engaging now. But I think we need to do a little more. We need to do much more. So IPL DMV, because this thing is happening in Maryland, and Maryland's new. Maryland has about 44 data centers right now, as compared to, say, our neighbor, Virginia, that has over 600. But the data centers that are being proposed in Maryland are being proposed in right next to homes. I mean, literally. We're trying to stop them before they even get out of, it's their infancy. So we came up with this new campaign called Real Wisdom. And the reason is because bringing these community voices to this discussion is necessary. And a lot of regulations on the county level they don't even have the ability for community input. We're finding this out as we see that regulation was slipped in, especially during COVID, where community input isn't necessary. It's not even required. So we're like, what? So now I think is the time for a lot of us to get engaged, especially if we're talking about proposed data centers. So we need to bring community wisdom to this, I want to call it a fight, because it is a fight. And that's what we're doing. So we're bringing real wisdom to this conversation, and hopefully it will center around the people who live in these communities. So what about legislation? So we're trying to deal with legislation on various levels. There's more than 60 data center related bills this session in Virginia and in Maryland. And dealing with all kinds of things, oversight of development, citing the location of the data centers. Peak demand is an interesting one that there's a bill for. If you guys want to know the bills, I can get you that information. Tax incentives. There were so many tax incentives placed for these data centers without our knowledge, and now we know. So we're trying to repeal some of those. We also are introducing in Maryland a cumulative impacts bill, which will require that before permits are allowed in certain communities that already have impacts of polluters and other types of impacts that are toxic to the community, they have to go through an environmental justice tool, and they have to go through additional processes before they're even permitted. And hopefully, prayerfully, that will pass this session. So real quick, I don't know, I know I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna be real quick. What communities are working in Maryland? We have 5 major areas where data centers are being pushed forward. We already have a huge data center in Frederick County, and they're actually doing a referendum. So hopefully that will happen. Baltimore County or has done a moratorium. Prince George's County did a moratorium. They have task force. Montgomery County also is being possible moratorium, and Baltimore City. Those are the major ones, but there are others creeping up as well. And so we at Interfaith Power and Light are not only keeping track of what's going on, but we're out in the community. We're working with grassroots organizations like the Sierra Club and others that are actually doing something in the community, hosting community gatherings. Because you can't just go into a community, you need to go into the community with the people that are in there, boots on the ground, and join their fight. So that's what we're doing. How can you guys get involved? How can the faith community join the local grassroots organizations? Join in, say, what can I do? Say, how can I host? Can I host sessions for you? Can I host educational forums? Can I come out and testify? Can I submit testimony for legislation? Can I join at press releases? We're having a data center lobby day next week. And we're inviting everyone to come to lobby with us and with grassroots communities. I mean, the grassroots organizations who are doing this on the ground. One of the things I want to say we could lift it up. I am the director of social justice for my congregation, and I do social justice moments, and I lift this up. And my pastors lift it up, and others are lifting it up. So just lift it up in your sermons and other things when you're speaking to your members. And finally, use AI deliberately. Use it purposefully. We all use data. We all use data center resources when we pick up our phone, not just a smartphone, but every call you make goes through a data center. I was in technology for a long time. I don't want to date myself, but so please use it wisely. Please use it deliberately and purposefully. So as I said, please check out our website and let those who are wise-hearted build as you have instructed. And that comes from Exodus 35:10. So thank you very much. And I'm sorry I went over.
No worries, Robin. I didn't want to cut you off because I really wanted you to have time to talk about what the faith community can do. There are tons of questions, and we're not going to have time to get to them, but I want to sort of open it up to Anne and Amanda and Robin. One thing that you all think as faith community folks that we are all in this, what should we do? Robin, you started that conversation. Uh, Anne, Amanda, you've worked with also with faith community folks in your communities. What's the one major thing that people that are in this webinar should take from it?
I'll just plus one to what Robin said, showing up and making your voice heard, supporting local communities who are engaging in raising their voices to demand I love the sign that you showed, Robin, that we demand that data centers be good neighbors, quiet, clean, and I can't remember the last term, responsible. I mean, common sense protections for communities. So I plus one what Robin said. We need more voices demanding common sense protections.
Perfect. And Anne, when you respond, let me ask Robin, could you put the link to the Real Wisdom site for folks in the chat? Anne, go ahead.
I would say that in any conversation you have with your clergy or your community, your neighbors, it needs to be about transparency, because you can't do this work and we can't make change if we don't know the magnitude of what's happening. And if it's kept secret, and Amanda, alluded to this. If the information is kept secret, we can't know what we're up against, and we don't know what has been approved until after. I mean, you don't know the what the impact will be until it's approved if there are NDAs and the like. So I think anybody of good conscience would want to have transparency.
Thank you. Thank you all three for your wisdom that you shared with us today. uh, Sharing the data that you have in your brains in a way that we can't usually get through just by Googling. Thank you. I want to thank all the participants as well and remind them that the recording, the slides, and any resources that have been shared in the chat, I will include the chat in the follow-up email. It is now 2 o'clock, so I want to be respectful of your times. Thank you. We appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.